First, I want to say how grateful I am for the Poor People's Campaign. A few years ago, ICUJP was very involved with it. I personally also was part of a Palm Sunday Peace Parade where we lifted up the Poor People's Campaign, went to Sacramento. So I was delighted that we have with us two speakers who can bring us up to date on what's going on with the Poor People's Campaign. One of them I had a nice chat with last week, Reverend Dr. Beth Johnson. She's a Unitarian minister in the Palomar Universalist Church Fellowship in Vista, California. She works on intersectional issues, including immigration, worker and racial justice, and environmental justice. And she's one of the quad chairs in the coordinating committee for the Poor People's Campaign. And she's a co-chair of the Unitarian Universalist Association Poor People's Campaign Leadership Council. Colleen Thomas is a certified spiritual director and holds an MA in theology and art from Fuller Theological Seminary. She's a member of All Saints Episcopal Church in Beverly Hills, and she's chaplain of the Los Angeles chapter of the Union of Black Episcopalians, as well as convener of the LA Poor People's Campaign Multi-Faith Working Group. So we have two really high-power speakers with us today, and I'm really pleased that they're with us, and I'm eager to hear what you have to share with us. Thank you.
Colleen, you're gonna start us off with, we like to start off with videos and music. So, Colleen.
Okay.
This is the checkers game where grandson and granddad will bond.
We have come to liberate you from all the ways that you hold us down. When you hurt me, you hurt you too. When you free me, you free yourself. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. Yes? Would you sing that with me? Okay, I'll sing the line, you sing it back to me. We have come to liberate you from all the ways that you hold us down. When you hurt me, you hurt you too. When you free me, you free yourself. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. Now you. Everybody rises, that's right. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. You. Poor folk are the first to suffer in this war economy. But I'm your daughter, I'm your mother. We're a chosen family. All together, when you live from the bottom, everybody rises. Woo! When you live from the bottom, sing it again. When you lift from the bottom, everybody rises. That's right. When you lift from the bottom, everybody rises. Hear this. We need air that's clean to breathe. We need water we can drink. You might say that we are weak, but we are stronger than you think. When you lift from the bottom, everybody rises. When you lift from the bottom, everybody rises. Oh, when you lift from the bottom, everybody rises. When you lift from the bottom, everybody rises. Okay. So now when I say,
Okay, I could listen to that all day, but we just wanted to get us started off on a good foot. Reverend Beth.
Thank you so much, Colleen. How many? I could only see, you know, a couple of people in the little gallery on the side, but I know Colleen and I were dancing and singing, and it might be really early in the morning for me, but I'm always up for singing and dancing with the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for more revival. Thanks for that, Colleen. I'm glad we started with that. I want to thank you, Anthony, and all of you for extending the invitation to the California Poor People's Campaign. And I'm so grateful that Colleen is here with us too. I think you're going to be excited to hear about what's happening in your region. Once again, and thank you for the introduction. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am currently on the stolen land of the Luiseño Nation and the Kumeyaay Nation here in San Diego County. So when I think about the 4th of July, I also think about this escape from tyranny, or rejection of tyranny, ended up actually oppressing, tyrannizing, and erasing an attempted erasure of our Indigenous siblings. So thanks for the reflection. And I just want to say, yes.
Beth, just a word, a logistical thing. We'd like you to speak till approximately 7:40, and then leave time for Q&A before we close out.
Right.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you. Yeah, Colleen and I have kind of worked that out. So thanks. So I just want to say in a really corny way, hello, friends. I mean, there are a number of friends here on the call, and I'm really such a strong affinity between Unitarian Universalists and our friends. My supervising pastor used to say that Unitarian Universalists were noisy Quakers. We, however, are not a peace church, but we are noisy and we align in so many ways. So it was mentioned that early on in the Poor People's Campaign, when it started, a number of folks from the organization were involved. Can you kind of just let me know how many people were involved, have been involved in the Poor People's Campaign? I'm just going to go ahead and take a look. So we've got a few people who are aware of the campaign, and I'm going to go ahead and talk about the campaign broadly. And then Colleen is going to tell you what is happening in LA currently and all the ways that you could get involved. How does that sound? As you all know, the campaign was begun by the Reverend Dr. William J. Barber of Repairers of the Breach and the Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris of the Kairos Center. Dr. Barber is such a large and charismatic figure. And I also like to lift up Dr. Liz, who has such a deep analysis of poverty. We know that the campaign is an extension of Dr. King's campaign, who in 1968, just prior to his death, had been organizing a Poor People's March on Washington. And the critique was of three interlocking systems: racism, poverty, and the war, militarization, the giant triplets. This campaign understands the intersectional nature of all of these issues and have added two. So systemic racism, poverty, the war economy, including the militarization of our communities and our borders, ecological devastation, which I'm quite sure Dr. King would have included in his analysis, and the distorted moral narrative of white Christian nationalism. So in coming together and after Moral Mondays, Dr. Barber, Dr. Liz, toured the country with a number of other folks and really recognized that it was time for a moral revival. The campaign here in California, actually, the first event was in September of 2017 at McCarty Chapel. Reverend Eddie Anderson, who was one of the first co-chairs of the California Poor People's Campaign. That was followed by a training and the official launch of the campaign on December 4th, 2017 in Washington, D.C. with a press conference and a delivery of our demands at that time. As Dr. Barber talks about, first we deliver our demands, let our demands be known, and then we follow through with action. So as you know, in spring of 2018, launched the 40 Days of Nonviolent Direct Action. And Anthony, you mentioned you went to Sacramento. Who else went to Sacramento? Anybody else go to Sacramento? And the actions took place on Mondays, over 40 days in, what do you think, Colleen? Probably at least 25 states and state capitals in Washington, D.C. Culminated in, and during that time, numbers of us went up to Sacramento on a regular basis each Monday, participated in Nonviolent Moral Direct Action. I'm one of the trainers for Nonviolent Moral Direct Action in the state. We were prepared and disciplined, and it was those were really good actions. And then the video that we saw was taken during the time of our final Moral March on Washington in 2018. Shortly after that video, we had some political education where there were three folks from the original Poor People's Campaign, and then our a civil disobedience, and then to follow, that is on a Thursday, and then the big action on Saturday in 2018. So that was considered the launch of the Poor People's Campaign. Since that time, one of the things that the song lifts up, sorry for the pun, you lift from the bottom, everybody rises, that this is a moral fusion movement that includes and must include folks from affected communities. It includes folks from organizations like yours and faith leaders like you. Recognizing that in the original Poor People's Campaign, it was poor white people, indigenous people, Latino people, Black folks, and that's what made it a fusion movement, and that's what we're building today. So next, what we engaged in was a bus tour, a very robust bus tour from the bottom of the states to the top of the top of the states. Actually, the opposite, from the top to the bottom, where we were really bringing the campaign to various areas. Now you know that we have a national structure and each state has tri-chairs. California is big enough, we have quad chairs. And as was mentioned, I'm in the faith seat at this time for the coordinating committee. What we were looking toward was the Poor People's Congress, Mass Assembly and Poor People's Congress in 2019, which was in person. At that time, all of the presidential candidates were invited to not give their talks or have a debate, but to hear questions from the people who were there. And that really was another initiation of our demands for the campaign. We then engaged, as probably many of you know, a really, really robust voter engagement. Really, we must do more, right? Mobilizing, organizing, registering, and educating people for a movement that votes. So the more we had more tours. I don't know how many of you got to go to San Francisco in 2019. We had a great event there, just really mobilizing folks from the states and then looking at what our national agenda was and is. So we know that I'm not going to go ahead and read them. I am going to share my screen and I'm going to have you just take a look, and then I'll put the fundamental principles in the chat for you to take a look at. So let me go ahead and do that first. My goal here is to give you the background and kind of where we've been and where we're headed, and then look at what's happening locally. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and let you take a look at it. In fact, I'll just go ahead and let's see. There we go. Can you all see that? These are the fundamental principles of the campaign. One of the things that we do in our gatherings, and I'll talk about the state, what the state looks like, is we read the fundamental principles. We ground ourselves in these principles, and we remind ourselves that this is the work that we're doing and this is what grounds us. We also are a nonviolent movement, so we have a covenant of nonviolence that people ascribe to. Whatever your feelings are about how you do direct action in other parts of your life, anyone who participates in direct actions with the Poor People's Campaign are expected to follow that. Now, this is one of the things that I heard, is that Zoom changed it so I can go to another screen directly and show you another screen. I want to give you just a brief look at our demands. Can you see the demands, Colleen? Did that come up? That's new. You used to have to go in and out. So these demands were, you know, the guiding demands that look at systemic racism. I'm going to run through this and I'll give you a link. Poverty. One of the things that's been really important for the Poor People's Campaign is political education. And Colleen may have a little bit of time to talk about the political education group that's working in LA that you can join and hear about some of the work that they're doing. So I wanted to familiarize you with the demands and the facts. What you can do when you're working with people is show them these demands and gives the grounding for the work. So this just basically goes over the 5 areas that we talked about. And I'm just going to scroll through this and go ahead and let you know that that's something that you can find. I'm going to go ahead and put the link in the chat so you can take a look at that. My goal here is to give you some resources and give you the opportunity to, when you talk about the campaign and you bring people into the campaign, you'll have lots of support with the LA region. But this gives you a little background. So we were gearing up for right? As we were all looking forward to a mass poor people's assembly and moral march on Washington in 2020. We pivoted really quickly, and that was a virtual event that close to 3 million people were able to view. And that really increased the visibility of the campaign. I will say this, that in 2018, we were committing 40 days of, there was a 40 days of nonviolent direct action each week. We didn't get a lot of press. You know, Trump was in office. There was all sorts of things that grabbed those headlines. I mean, MSNBC, Democracy Now! Talked about the Poor People's Campaign. But one of the things that's happened now, after our mass Poor People's Assembly and Moral March on Washington that we did virtually, the impact and the visibility of the Poor People's Campaign nationally has really, really risen, such that Dr. Barber and people from the Poor People, and Dr. Liz, folks from the Poor People's Campaign, met with the Progressive Caucus prior to the inauguration, and met with the Biden administration prior to the inauguration, so that our demands in our agenda are very, very much in the fore. One of the things that we've moved to now is the understanding that we need a third Reconstruction that is fully addressing poverty and low wages from the bottom up. That's our current demands. It was a resolution that was introduced by Representative Barbara Lee and signed by several, numerous legislators. And we just had a press conference June 7th in front of legislators' offices. There was a great one in LA that is asking our legislators to sign on to this resolution that fully addresses poverty from the bottom up. Colleen, I want to give a little bit of a read. I'm going to point us to 2022. You want to do a little bit of a clip from Dr. Barber, and then you do. Does that give you enough time to do what you want to do? I want to make sure that we have lots of time because there will be questions and answers.
Yes, plenty of time, but it's a good time to share this clip. This is from a recent press conference introducing the third Reconstruction resolution with Representative Barbara Lee and Representative Priol. I always lose her last name. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Let me share my screen here.
Clear-eyed that if this nation is serious and wants to fully address poverty and low wealth from the bottom up, we all of us first as human beings and as moral agents must embrace this, an omnibus vision of a third Reconstruction. We can't tinker around the edges. We can't pass a little policy here and there every 10 or 15 years. No democracy can claim to be strong when 140 million people, or 43% of its people, are poor and low wealth. And I want to say to me to get these numbers, that's talking about 52% of children under 18, 39 million children. That's 41%, Congressman Leaf, of our elders above 65, 21 million. That's 42.6% of men, that's 65 million. That's 45% of women, 74 million women. That's 60% of black people, 26 million. That's 64% of Latinos, 38 million. That's 40% of Asian people, 80 million. That's 59% of Native Indigenous people, that's 2.1 million. And listen, because of how the narrative is often misspoken. That's 33.5% of white people. That's 66 million white people. 62 million people right now, and in the midst of the pandemic, make less than $17 an hour. Before the pandemic ever hit, according to a study at Columbia University, 250,000 people a year died from poverty, not the pandemic of poverty. 750 people a day. 400 people were making an average of $97,000 an hour, while 62 million people made less than $17 an hour. Prior to the pandemic, those who suffered the most during the pandemic, they suffered the most while billionaires made nearly $2 trillion during the pandemic. 8 million more of our brothers and sisters in this country fell into poverty. And poor and low-wage workers, the stat that we haven't talked about much during this pandemic. You hear about race, and we should, and you hear about different cities, but the poor and low wealth people of all groups have been the ones who risked the most in this pandemic. They were the first that had to go back to work, the first to get infected, the first to get sick, the first to get hospitalized, and the first to die. They have been 3 times as likely to contract COVID as their wealthier neighbors. And we know that if we're going to get the omnibus legislation necessary for a third reconstruction, fully addressing poverty and low wealth from the bottom up, we must address several interlocking injustices simultaneously. You can't separate them anymore. Systemic racism as it relates to all of racism, against black people, brown people, indigenous people, Asian people, and the collateral damage done to white people because of systemic racism. Systemic poverty, ecological devastation, denial of health care, the war economy, and militarization of our community, and the false moral narrative of religious nationalism. We know that the cost of not addressing inequality is too high. This is the question we
Sorry for that false stop there, but
Thank you so much. I think that's one of the really powerful things about the campaign. Well, there's so many things that have really impacted, I guess, the influence of the campaign nationally and locally is this deep analysis that everything is connected, everything is at stake, and everything that we do matters. So I'll go ahead and put in a moment a link to the third reconstruction, to the resolution in the chat. So where are we now? Where we are right now is moving toward June 18th, 2022, where we will have an in-person and actually, hybrid, but going in person for those of us who can to Washington for a mass Poor People's Assembly and Moral March on Washington. So we're excited about that possibility. And one of the ways that we're going to have during Q&A, we'll have time to let you know. I see hands, but how about if I finish up my thought and then I can take a question. Yeah, I don't do so well kind of multitasking on the screen. Sorry about that, because I know there'll be some Q&A. One of the things for folks like yourself is that we belong to a prophetic council of faith leaders and other organizations that meet sometimes monthly. Maybe we might skip a month, or maybe a little bit more if there's something going on, that really give us the connection as faith leaders and organizations to go ahead and infuse our communities, energize our communities, give resources to our communities, and also broaden our reach. So what I'll be doing at the end is making sure that all of you know how to connect with the prophetic council I'll send you that information. And Colleen is going to talk a little bit about our faith working group when Colleen does her piece. So I see a question. And do you want to go ahead and ask the question? Fernando, I saw your hand up.
Okay, thank you for having you. You know, it is really an important campaign, because I agree that this is really a systemic problem. You know,
Yeah.
you know, as we all know that the U.S. government is has a lot of money. You know, but when it comes to the people's need, it seems there's no money. You know, and this is becoming a problem, not just a systemic problem, but it's become a habit by the government, you know. But when it comes to the expenditure of military and weaponry that kills people and is not helping the world, and there's tons of money. It's like there's no ending in expenditure, you know. And I guess so let me just stop right there, because
Thank you. Yeah, I can see there's such alignment. And we'll have time for more questions. I saw there's a question about what is the second Reconstruction? First of all, the first Reconstruction, you know, that was after so-called the end of slavery. There was the first Reconstruction, and we call the second Reconstruction is the period at the end of Civil War into the 60s that was launched the civil rights movement. So I'm going to stop there because I want y'all to hear from Colleen and what's happening locally, and we'll have more time for questions. So Colleen.
Hello. Okay. Thank you, Reverend Beth. I want to talk a little bit about, yes, what's happening locally, but I thought I would also begin with some of the work that Reverend Beth has done in organizing California State and the faith leaders, and just share a little bit of both of our mission statements. So the California Poor People's Campaign Faith Leaders Working Group supports the California Coordinating Committee and various regions. And we are always looking at the 5 interlocking injustices, which Reverend Beth has mentioned, from a faith-based moral center. And so we attempt to do this by engaging in theological reflection, direct action, and organizing. And California State Faith Leaders supports the development of other faith working groups, like our own faith working group here in LA, and coordinates the work of faith leaders working groups across the state. In LA, our faith working group meets twice a month on the 2nd and 4th Wednesdays of the month. We start our meetings by reading one of the 2 principles that ground us particularly in our focus as a faith working group. That's principle number 1, which says we are rooted in a moral analysis based on our deepest religious and constitutional values that demand justice for all. Moral revival is necessary to save the heart and soul of our democracy. And then also principle number 7 states, whereas the distorted moral narrative of religious nationalism blames poor and oppressed people for our poverty and oppression, our deepest religious and constitutional values insist that the primary moral issues of our day must be how our society treats the poor, those on the margins, women, LGBTQIA2 folks, workers, immigrants, the disabled and the sick, equal protection under the law, and the desire for peace, love, and harmony within and among nations. We, as a Los Angeles Poor People's Campaign Faith Working Group, have only been convening for less than a year. And we developed a mission statement that's always evolving, but we consider ourselves a multi-faith working group organized to directly address the pillar of the distorted moral narrative while setting forth the spiritual imperative and moral focus of PPC, a national call for moral revival. And we do this by providing practical resources for the mobilization of clergy, faith leaders, elders, lay people, congregations, and faith centers throughout Los Angeles. And we're open to members of any faith or sacred tradition. One thing I'd like to note from this mission statement is that we're organizing to directly address the pillar, one of these 5 interlocking injustices, which is the distorted moral narrative of religious nationalism. We have many other working groups in Los Angeles, policy and legislation. There's a legal working group. There's an arts and culture working group. I might be missing one. But because the policy and legislation group focuses on what the obvious policy and legislation, and our legal group focuses on also issues regarding legislation, we've chosen to focus on this more difficult in some ways to organize around one of the pillars, which is the distorted moral narrative of religious nationalism, which has always been quite important. And we lived through this, right, with the previous administration and with the insurrection of the beginning of this year. It's very serious, this distorted moral narrative of religious nationalism, as we see the distorted moral narrative driving our political leaders on the right, but also our religious institutions. And while Christian nationalism influences politics perhaps in a more obvious way, what we found in some of our interfaith conversations is that religious nationalism and conservatism exists across many faith traditions. It's typical that if you are religious in any tradition, you tend to think and vote conservatively along this moral narrative of, say good behavior, not necessarily good moral politics. And so we spend a lot of time in our LA Faith Working Group discussing how did we arrive at this distorted moral narrative of religious nationalism, and how do we dismantle it? And so that is our work to do currently. We have some developing sub-working groups in the LA Faith Working Group. One of those sub-working groups in development and formation is dismantling Christian nationalism. We are in the early stages of planning an interfaith dialogue with faith leaders in LA to begin this conversation and to gain a deeper understanding of how in all of our traditions we've arrived at this place of a distorted narrative of morality that does not do what this principle suggests it should do, which is focus on how our society treats the poor, those on the margins, women, LGBTQIA2 squared folks, et cetera, immigrants. And so if you'd like more information, we'll share later contacts so that we can invite you all to this event. We also have are forming a Faith Partners LA Outreach sub-working group. The Poor People's Campaign is very nationally recognized, but within the LA region, we are focusing on establishing relationships with other like-minded organizations so that we can not only call on others to support when we have PPC events, but partner with the many organizations and actions that take place across our city. And then lastly, and both interconnected, we are, this fall, we'll be forming a sacred text study group. And we are going to be looking at what our various sacred traditions have to say about morality, and what our various sacred traditions have to say about justice and what they have to say about the poor. This is, we hope, a way that we can further educate ourselves and also invite a variety of faith traditions into our movement. And in a similar vein, we are forming a sub-working group that we're calling Prayer is Action. And again, really being intentional about what is prayer across various traditions and how prayer is central to movement building. And it's especially important, the woman, Kathleen Morse, who is heading up our Prayers Action Group, she's one of our disabled persons. And so for the disabled, direct action, physical action is not an option. And so they are looking for ways to be engaged. And we believe that prayer is engagement. So we'll be sharing information about that soon as well. And so I guess what I would add to this is, well, I'll say this, just to give a couple of examples. In the multi-faith space during the election, leading up to the election, we created a multi-faith election novena. Novena is based in the Catholic tradition. Essentially, it's 9 days of prayer. And we explored prayer and intentions across various traditions. And we want to continue to create resources like this that support the work of PPC, but also honor all of our faith traditions. And we also partnered with Pastor Q from the church on Skid Row over the Christmas and New Year holiday. We had an evangelical worship leader who was doing a series of live events and outreach. And he wanted to go to Skid Row, not wear masks, and have a worship music service and hand out supplies. Well, Pastor Q has been pastoring in that community for years. Skid Row is his home, and those are his people. Sean Fute was an outsider and not regarding the needs of the Skid Row community, nor the work that organizers in that community have done to spread awareness about COVID safety. And so we had a very large turnout for a car protest to block Sean Fute from spreading his message and COVID throughout the Skid Row community. And so we want to continue to partner in action in that way. And also the Sean Fute protest was one of the more clear ways in which we can do direct action that dismantles this distorted moral narrative of Christian nationalism. And so things that we're considering going forward, we want to consider how we invite others into our local work, but also how we partner with other organizations and movements that share our principles. And I think that's pretty much all that I wanted to share here. And I look forward to your questions and some time for dialogue.
Thank you so much, Colleen. See, y'all, there's a lot going on in the LA area region, but who's my Orange County person? Is that, who's my Orange County person? Let me look through the whole screen. There was someone here from Orange County. Never fail. There's things happening in Orange County as well. So we're going to take some questions. What I'd like to do, mostly so I don't forget, is to let you know what the other working groups are that, and there is, you know, definitely like some overlap. But the working groups, and let me go ahead and make sure, there's a lot. Throughout the state, there are working groups, there's communications, political education, and as I mentioned, headed by Margaret Prescott and folks from the LA region, they host a political education session every Thursday, like at noon, the book study and political education. There's arts and culture. There's an accessibility working group. So there's all sorts of ways that you can get involved in addition to, you know, the faith work, but any other places that you want to plug in. So Colleen, there's lots of questions. So how do y'all want to handle that? Shall Colleen and I can just field the questions, and you want us to do that way? And I'm going to go ahead and it's helpful if you, Tail, if you can raise your hand, and I see some, and if you don't know where the hand button is, just wave your hand and we'll look through the screen and be able to see that. But I see Jasmine's hand first. Hi, Jasmine.
Hi. Thank you so much for your presentation. My question is, what can we do as faith leaders and people of faith to outreach and share it with our congregations? Because a lot of people that I meet, they don't know that it even exists. So I'm a part of it, and I love it, and I appreciate all the, you know, what can we do? And I wanted to invite you. And Colleen. There's a homeless meeting with Pastor Q. It's Pastor Q's Skid Row. So there's a homeless meeting this Sunday. I'll send it to you in an email.
Okay.
Thank you.
Colleen can maybe do that. I would, there's so much, I did so many trips up to LA during the formation of the campaign. Jasmine, that's a great question. And that particular question is one that the California statewide faith working group is currently going to be taking up. You know, How do we do that? What are the most effective ways? You're already involved in the campaign. So I would say continued involvement with the campaign, go into the faith working group in LA, being involved in the regional working group, regional steering committee. And I don't know if you go to the LA regional meetings. And I've got a, on Sundays, the LA region meets. The LA region meets at 3 p.m. on Sundays. So that's one of the ways that you can know what's going on right in your area, and then bring that to the faith communities you're in. And then I think really inviting folks to the faith working group is one of the ways to do that. So we're currently, what's the best way to do that? What does it look like? So we're all kind of in process with that. Does that help? Definitely outreach, inviting people to actions and things like that. Inviting yourself to go to speak to them or to meet with Colleen, and bringing people together in that way. Anthony?
Beth and Colleen, I want to thank you both. This has been really inspiring and challenging, and just so grateful for the work that you do. I wanted to share that our nonprofit, Making Housing and Community Happen, has really been influenced by Reverend Barber. And we had Moral Mondays at the Pasadena City Council. For about 7 months, we had people of faith come pray by the statues of Mac and Jack Robinson right outside of City Hall. And our prayers were answered. After 8 months, we had been praying for the city council to use some vacant land near the city hall for affordable housing and housing for people who are homeless. And they agreed unanimously to do that. So we believe in the power of prayer. We believe in the Poor People's Campaign and in the techniques of Reverend Barber. My question really has to do with housing justice and how this fits in with your work. My wife, for the last 25 years, has been working on a kind of theological framework for land and housing. Would be glad to talk with you, I think, about that. But I think it's a critical part of the effort to end poverty. And I was wondering how your work relates to housing justice.
I don't know if you want to take that, Colleen, or if you want me to.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's just so intimately related. We've got Kenya Alcazar, who is on the National Steering Committee and also on the California Coordinating Committee, one of our first sets of quad chairs who work on tenants' rights, things like that. So it's intimately related. So one of the things that can happen is when you're part of the regional group, the regional subcommittee or of the whole national, of the whole state, and Colleen put their meeting time in. So for organizations and faith leaders to be connected so that the work that you're doing can come and be supported by people from the Poor People's Campaign. And then when there are other actions that are taking place throughout your region, and sometimes obviously for the state or the country, then we can all come together. But I think having someone who is able to connect on the regional steering committee level is one of the ways that we can enhance one another's work. So attending their events, they just had a really good webinar that I couldn't go to on the first Reconstruction, because we're talking about this third Reconstruction, and people didn't know what the first and second Reconstructions were, so they had a really great thing. So that's one of the ways. Does that answer your question? I'm really hoping that, because folks are doing work in all sorts of different areas, but the way to connect is, the way to enhance the work is by showing up and making that intentional connection. I saw Steve.
Can I add?
Go ahead, yeah.
I would also add to that, Anthony, that regionally, the Poor People's Campaign is still growing and movement building. And so the national focus of Poor People's Campaign, you know, I tend to liken it to Dr. King's movement, right? It started in the South, and then he expanded to these urban areas, Chicago and Los Angeles, where there were very different issues. And so Reverend Barber, being based in North Carolina, we tend to nationally focus on poverty as it affects those southern regions. And regionally, we're having conversations about how to get more issue specific to the Los Angeles region to deal with the crises here. You know, in North Carolina, it might be poverty and trailer park communities. In Los Angeles, it is the unhoused, it's our tent communities. Also in the South, there's not as much of an immigration challenge, but for us, we know immigration is a huge local issue. So we welcome more participation and more coalition building with organizations. And so I'd love to get more information about your housing justice work. And as Jasmine mentioned, to connect more with Pastor Q and continue building that relationship with the homeless community downtown in Skid Row.
Yep. Thanks for that. And I want to put a plug in for if you don't get information, if you're not signed up to receive emails from the national campaign or from California, you definitely want to do that. We have a fabulous California Poor People's Campaign newsletter. It is fabulous, and it will let you know some of the things that are coming up. So we want to make sure that folks get connected through Action Network and through our system. So I saw Steve. I'm sorry.
Bill here. We need to kind of wrap up the Q&A. I see one more hand up on
there's like,
Phil.
There's four hands.
Wait 1 second. Phil, I don't know what timing you're looking at. It's only 8:48.
I am
This
sorry.
meeting,
I was thinking we'll be closing out at 9.
Okay.
My apologies.
Yeah, I would like to go ahead and take the questions, and these are how I'm just going to go across. So Steve, Carol, Andy, Dr. Ruby, and yeah.
Let me just clarify on what I told our guest at the beginning of the meeting. We will go till about 9:20 with Q&A. Then we'll have announcements, and then we'll convene our virtual circle to end the meeting by 9:30. So that's our overall schedule. First of all, thank you both. I hope you would each put your email addresses into the chat so we can all stay in touch with you. I put in the chat that ICUJP officially wants to become a faith partner, if that is a status. And we are very eager to support your work generally, but my first question, Colleen, you mentioned an event coming up in fighting white Christian nationalism. Is there a date for that event, and can we help promote and co-sponsor that?
I would gladly welcome your help promoting and co-sponsoring it. This is hot off the presses here. So this was a decision from our very last meeting. And as I solidify details, I will absolutely share those with your community. If there's a specific contact I should have to share the information, please share that with me in the chat.
Yes, certainly. for no other connection, link back through Anthony, we have a communications director whom you interacted with to plan today's event. This issue for us is crucial. We've addressed it frequently over the course with speakers. We've had speakers from the Charlottesville lawsuit against the white supremacists arising out of the Unite the Right event in 2017. So this is one of our highest priorities, and I'm thrilled to feel it's breaking news here today to learn about your planning, because we want to be instrumental in that. My broader question for both Beth and Colleen, because we are a clearinghouse of many organizations and we have a wide agenda, digging deeper beyond naming issues, what kinds of actions does PPC take in California and in Southern California? Do you lobby for legislation and ordinances through the city and the state? Do you meet with elected officials? Do you have petition drives? In other words, what does the work itself look like?
Okay, I'll go ahead and take that, Colleen, and then if you want to add to it. First of all, I want to answer the very first question that you asked, and is how do you become part of a faith partner? I put in the chat the email for Reverend Casimir Brown, who is the lead for the National Faith Partners with Dr. Adam Barnes. So you can go ahead and directly email Reverend Casimir Brown, and she will be able to get you on the list. You'll be able to then receive communications. And I really encourage you to join the California Faith Working Group. If you are interested in that, you can go ahead and email me, and I'll make sure that you get added to the list. If you are not receiving communications from California and from National, as I said, we really want to get you on those lists, because you're going to see what's happening and you'll know the actions that are going on locally and throughout the state. And then of course they lift up the national organization efforts. So regarding legislation, the Poor People's Campaign does not promote specific legislation unless we have been involved in crafting it. So we can lift up the issues, but we don't endorse that legislation. There's usually direction from National on campaigns that are taking place across the country at the same time. For instance, in the press conferences that were held across the country and across the state on June 7th about the third Reconstruction and asking legislators to sign on. So we kind of take some of that direction and some of that lead from National. And I think Colleen really raised up a good point, is how is this translated into what the local needs are? So one of the ways to find out what's happening is to be in the regional, be in that regional loop, so that you know what actions are. There's a process for the Poor People's Campaign, the California Poor People's Campaign, to endorse actions, and that comes through the California Coordinating Committee. So does sponsoring actions, so that we make sure that we're all in alignment. Like again, the last action that took place in LA and across the state were the press conferences, and we're awaiting direction for, from National, what are some of the national things that we're going to do. And then regionally, what often happens, and Colleen, you may have something to say about this, is like Pastor Q or other organizations that are doing work, Poor People's Campaign folks show up to support that. Whether we're sponsoring it or not, that's, that takes approval by the coordinating committee. So does that answer your question, Steve?
Yes. On another occasion, I'd like to talk about the notion of not supporting legislation unless you've crafted it. I was putting into the chat, we would hope you'd support the John Lewis Voter Advancement Act, the For the People Act.
We're totally all in conversation about how we can do that.
Oh, good.
That's an issue. Yeah, that's an issue that's been raised on the level of the California Coordinating Committee, because we would like to be able to do that, but we do take that direction. We can support voting rights, right? So we do take that direction from national, and that's an issue we're constantly talking about and waiting for more clarity on.
And then to Colleen, what I'm getting at is we're a very activist group. We're not philosophical. I mean, we are philosophical in many ways, but we want to get off the couch and do the work. And Colleen, within the LA region, are there examples? And I know COVID has distorted all of this, but what sort of activities does the group engage in?
Well, to piggyback off of what Reverend Beth said, we take our cues from national, where we have been involved in more direct action has been on June 7th. Locally, we held a press conference outside of Jimmy Gomez's office, the 34th District, to demand he support the third Reconstruction resolution. He did sign on to co-sponsor the resolution. We also recently created door hangers for the child tax credit. We have been distributing those and working to inform people locally that this child tax credit does in fact exist. So those are a couple of recent examples of action. And Steve, this is a conversation we have a lot because we want to be active, but with the faith working group in particular, as distinct from our policy and legislation working group, we are giving ourselves time to have what are seemingly philosophical conversations around this distorted moral narrative. Because the question that comes up is, how do you do direct action to dismantle a philosophy, which is this distorted moral narrative? So we're giving ourselves a bit of grace and time to be in conversation around that. It's a serious, serious issue, but we're always marching and taking direct action against the more tangible injustices, right? But this injustice of Christian nationalism, how do we confront that? What do we do to combat that? What does direct action look like, especially direct nonviolent action when the opponents, so to speak, are perfectly willing to engage in violence, as we saw in January?
And I would definitely echo that. And so what we're saying is it's a both and. There's reflection, action, reflection, right? So the faith working group in LA has, LA region has, that is their focus. And there are still plenty of actions to participate in. So does that, I'm not in full screen, so I can't see everyone. There we go. So is that helpful? Okay, great. Oh, people shifted on my screen. So I'm just going to go ahead and take the question from Carol Francis.
Yeah, let's go, Francis. Yeah, I remember watching Democracy Now! And Moral Mondays, and I was just blown away by the group's work, even back then with these white middle-class women marching with, I mean, it was really phenomenal. Could you tell us, and I would really suggest that, thank you for clarifying what the second Reconstruction was. I would think that when you talk about the third Reconstruction, you mentioned what the first two were for people who didn't get that. Could you tell us more about the cultural working group? Is it mostly graphic artists, or do you have writers, musicians, actors, and what do they do?
Arts and, do you want to take that, Colleen, or would you like me to talk about arts and culture?
You start. If I may have something to add.
Okay. Arts and culture is a really robust working group. It's a statewide working group. We have people in almost every region, and I don't know if I'll have time to talk about the state structure, but arts and culture is just woven throughout the movement. You see the banners behind me. These are banners. We make banners. Theomusicology is a huge part of the work that we do. You saw hopefully we're hoping to be able to end with another song, but I don't know, Colleen, they got lots of great questions. So we have song leaders, there's a song book. We encourage people to know what the songs are. And you know what, it's not really safe for us to sing together now, but you know what, y'all will be singing sometime soon, I am sure. So it's graphic design, it's art, it's theomusicology, teaching people the songs, singing the songs, learning them. It's writing, it is creating art and banners. There's a fabulous artist in the Bay Area, David Solnit, who kind of helps with the other quad chair. Nell Myhand heads the arts and culture group. We just produced, we've only just seen the draft, a video lifting up California's work. So that's what arts and culture does.
Thank you.
It's integral. I'm going to go ahead. Anything else to add, Colleen?
Yes, I just wanted to add that Tom Grode is the convener of the Arts and Culture Working Group here in Los Angeles. He's an actor, a multidisciplinary performer, and he is very passionate. I can put his email in the chat. I'm sure he'd love for you to reach out, Carol Francis.
Thank you for that. I've seen Tom's name and I didn't connect him. Thank you for that. Isn't Colleen amazing? Yeah, and that's one of the ways to really be involved, is to pick your passion in that way and let it happen. I saw Andy, and I'm just going across my screen, and hopefully we'll get to all the questions.
Hi, yes, thank you so much for this. I had also listened to the Moral Mondays occasionally, and I'm glad to see this update, and also glad to see the Arts and Culture Working Group. In terms of other regions in California, do you have anything, is there anything active in Riverside County? I'm out in the Coachella Valley, so I'd like to find out.
Yeah,
about
we have Inland Empire and the San Diego region. We don't have anything right out where you are right now. But what we do have is we have an at-large region that folks who aren't in an established region can attend that. And then we can help people. The goal is, if there's enough folks and interest, to start a little thing wherever you are. So if you get on the mailing list, you'll see when our next regional, what did I call it? At-large regional meeting is happening. So that's the best I can do for you, Andy.
I just signed on to the California list, but I wasn't sure on the website where to find out more information about those other, for example, the Inland Empire group and stuff like that.
That, you know what?
Hopefully
we're working on that. We don't have like our own website, but I just put in the chat the California Poor People's Campaign Facebook page, and that's a good way to get to stuff.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Sure. Dr. Ruby.
Yes. Oh, I just wanted to thank you for your work. I'm going to scoot a little closer here.
You're doing great.
And I've been involved in like intervention and everything since the 70s and 80s. It was like prayer. I've been on the prayer line, so it's been about 35 years. But what's interesting me now is, and I'm looking at 60s and 70s, is the manufacturing and the factories. And you had mentioned about the finances and everything, whereas we see everything going up, but the pay isn't going up. Right. And you know, you have the unions. You used to have like unions that would do the protection and everything. But in working and volunteering too, I see everything, even the boxes, putting the boxes together for all of these different things. That's work, that's employment. So a lot of this is being in delivery and everything. Is there anything that is working with people for employment and for finances and for consciousness to change, to be able to change their mind about the money that they're making? We see so many of these young people coming up with these creative things, and you look at it, and what are they? They're millionaires, you know? But then a lot of the other people aren't getting this idea of work, of just staying poor. So is there a way, or do you have a committee that's specifically working with that? With the finances and with understanding the poverty?
No, not a specific group that works with that, because that's all part of all of the demands. And it's very much part of the third Reconstruction, fully addressing poverty from the bottom up. So it's kind of woven through what we do, you know, like one of our partners is SEIU, you know, the union. So there's not a specific working group for that, because it's actually, I would say that that's very foundational to the demands of the campaign. So wherever we can put our voice and our actions for that, we do.
Okay.
So yeah, like here in San Diego County, I show up for, you know, janitors when we've had Fight for 15, you know, so we've absolutely been kind of supporting and in part of all of that, but it's kind of woven, Doctor, into everything that we're doing.
Thank you. And thank you for the music too. I love music. So
we
thank
want
you
more music. I think we need more music, Colleen. I saw Barbara and then I saw Maggie, and that might bring us to where, did you have anything to add, Colleen? I'm so sorry.
No.
This question is actually a question to the whole group, because I know that in South Los Angeles, we had a man speaking about turning lawns into food and sharing food. And I would think that your Poor People's Campaign should definitely link up with him. I feel very, very strong that the poor people are not getting proper nutritious food. We need nutritious organic food, and it's not in our regular food chains. And Colleen, if your group could hook up with his, and I'm sorry, I don't know the name of the man that did it or anything about the group, but I'm positive Steve does. And I think that the two of you could work on the food problem here in Los Angeles, at least, and maybe be able to spread what he's done, because he seems to have a head for economics, and he's manufactured out of just sharing food, something.
Well, thanks for that. And maybe let this person know that there's a LA Poor People's Campaign, and he can get in touch with.
I think that the initiative needs to come from this meeting. Somebody else has to step in and take over from me and give you the contact, because he's built a really great thing, and we had him less than a month ago, I think. And I don't know his contact information. I just see the connection.
Thank you for that. Maybe someone from your group will step up.
I hope so.
Colleen, anything on that? Or should we go to Maggie?
No, I'm taking notes, of, just all of these.
Steve and Anthony should have the information.
Yes.
Thanks, Colleen.
Thank you.
I'm not. Yeah, Maggie.
Okay. I don't have this completely together as in a question, but we hear about listening groups between Israelis and Palestinians, for example, where there's some common ground and they find that they have the same issues together and can end up having communication and love between each other. Is this an impossible dream as far as getting maybe some coalitions or some connection with the white nationalists in terms of communication? And in other words, instead of fighting it, somehow coming together on some common ground and being able to have personal relationships. Is that something that's been worked on, or how would that be?
That's a really big question. I certainly have some opinions. That's not something we're doing as a Poor People's Campaign. Colleen, I don't know if you want to take this one. That's to me, that's like another webinar. It's a long discussion. And I think when people are committed to killing Black and brown people, I'm wondering what that dialogue looks like. So Colleen, I'm going to defer to you if you want to.
Maybe it's impossible. Maybe that I just wondered if it had been approached.
Not within the Poor People's Campaign. Colleen, I think you might be muted, but you don't look muted.
Can you?
Now I can, yeah.
I was just saying it has not been directly approached, but a big conversation, and yeah. We will. I'm adding it to my list, Maggie. And outside of personal opinion, I don't think I can say much more right now.
I of course ventured my personal opinion.
I'm always interested in personal opinion. Your experience would tell you that's just literally a waste of time because you have better things to do. So I just wondered if it was part of the possibility.
It's not. I mean, it probably happens person to person, but organization to organization. You know what? That's a big question. I think I'd be happy to engage it another time, but I think it's bigger than we can venture into today. Anthony, how are we doing on time? I see 2 more questions that came up. Do we feel as complete as we are to move on? Because we did want to close with a song.
Sometimes we just have both people ask the question, and maybe could wrap it up with a quick response to both of them. So,
okay.
And then we'd love to hear that song before we end.
We really want to hear the song. So Joseph, if you would give your question, we're not going to answer it immediately, and then Michael give theirs.
Thank you. I was just reflecting on this discussion about how much should the campaign be a source or support for legislation, and I tend towards the choice the campaign has been making so far, provided that all the adherents of it have access to all the other groups that are working on specific legislation, and for one main reason. It's a commonplace for activists to think that you can't suppress an idea by violence. And unfortunately, that applies to the ideas we don't like, as well as to the ideas that we do like. And I'm thinking of slavery as an example, or one way of referencing the ideas that can possibly be limited or somehow combated by violence, but not really uprooted without that spiritual side. And that spiritual side and highlighting the people and letting the, legislative be led by others who aren't going to be highlighting the moral, seems to me as the power that we need to use, and the campaign is upholding that. Any comments on your part? Because I think the campaign is doing what just isn't being done elsewhere.
Thank you. I think we were going to take the next question, and the person, Michael, and then we can maybe give some...
Okay, yeah, not really a question. I just wanted to reiterate what I put in the chat, which is that we've been trying to develop a end systemic racism working group here at ICUJP. We have a meeting after this. We'll be staying on the call, and I'd love if you could stay or somebody could. And it seems like you're doing a lot of that same work. Our idea was to try to create a faith-based network from people involved in social justice committees or anti-racism committees in their denominations, and try to build that into a critical mass. So we definitely want to collaborate.
Yeah, thank you for that. I saw it and then it flew out of my brain. Absolutely. That would be a great connection. So please stay in touch with Colleen. I won't be able to stay on. I have a meeting with ICE in a few minutes.
Can I respond, Michael? I actually attended that event last week, and it was excellent. And I have it on my calendar to attend this work group meeting. You can share the login information.
It's just staying on this call. Actually, we sent out the link to this call and could save it at 9:30.
Well, that's perfect. That's great. And I'm just not sure that I answered the other question really well. Joseph.
I could respond to Joseph. My response, it wasn't a question so much that I heard as we find that many come to the Poor People's Campaign because of this spiritual and moral underpinning of the principles and the co-chairs, that it's a safe space for people who want to be involved in activism, but who also want to allow room for their faith to operate in space of activism. And so, yes, we are grateful for the value system of the Poor People's Campaign. And I will say one of the challenges that we have with people being drawn by a faith is that they're not always, and I speak of myself too, coming to the campaign. I come from a faith background, but not an organizing background. So we find that a lot of education is necessary in learning the difference between justice and charity. And so that continues to be a conversation that we have. We can come with a charity mindset, but in the Poor People's Campaign, we are the poor people. We are not trying to do something for the poor. We are in solidarity with the poor.
Amen. That was really such an important thing to lift up. Absolutely. the old story of, you know, there's babies floating down a river and people notice that, oh, there's a baby in the river, and somebody goes to pull the baby out, and then another baby, and then people, you know, we have to pull out these babies. A whole industry goes around to take care of these babies who they're pulling out of water and social service and everything that you need. And someone starts to run upstream, and they're like, people go like, what are you doing? We need you. And they're like, I'm going to see who's throwing the babies in the water. So, you know, it's not an us and them. It's not a, right. It's not a, we're doing this for others. It's that fusion. We're doing it for us. So, Colleen, you have a song for us?
Yes. Okay. And this is from our recent Poor Peoples and Low Wage Workers Assembly, which was more of a hybrid this year. So we went from completely virtual last year to hybrid to gearing up for a big in-person event in June of 2022. So let me share my screen one last time.
Now, I don't know about you, but I work with this crew that starts early in the morning. And somewhere around 7 o'clock, I started hearing ding, 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 ding on my phone. And it didn't give me any choice. Whether I wanted to or not, I had to wake up with my mind stayed on justice. I had to do that, all right? So how many of you woke up this morning with this on your mind? So I'm gonna hear you sing it with me, right? Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on justice. Hold on. That's all right. That's all right. We can start again. You can always begin again. That's right. Come on. All right. We woke up this morning with our mind stayed on freedom. How about that? Woke up this morning with my mind, it was stayed on freedom. You know I woke up this morning with my mind, it was stayed on freedom. I said I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah. 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 Yeah, I got up this morning with my
I'm sorry, is my connection bad?
Yeah, it was going out a little bit.
Okay. Well, we woke up this morning with our mind stayed on freedom and justice. That's the message, and let's leave it there.
Maybe put a link to the song.
I will.
In the chat. I heard somebody singing, by the way. Somebody was off mute singing. And I loved that. I think we all need to sing. Can we take a breath together too? I know you're going to move into your closing, so I won't do it for you. But if you just take a breath together. I'm grateful to all of you and to my colleague, Colleen, for your leadership and for all of you. Thanks for having us.